Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 149 of Dudes and Beer. And as a Cajun, I'm obliged to tell everybody, you may want to back away from your earphones for just a second, because it is Mardi Gras, everybody.
Nice.
Happy Mardi Gras, probably the most hallowed day in the Cajun tradition, the day before Lent. So be safe out there, all you Mardi Gras that were out chasing chickens all day. I know what goes on afterward. Please make sure that you're driving safely. Don't end up in a crawfish ditch somewhere. And on that note, we are going to enjoy a beautiful shot of Evangeline's praline pecan liqueur straight out of New Orleans.
Woo, let's do it.
Happy Mardi Gras, Steve-O.
Happy Mardi Gras, brother.
And tonight, we actually have a fantastic speaker and futurist that I happened to catch in Houston while I was working. Levi Sauerbrei from nerbutler.com will be joining us in just a minute, talking about
that's so good.
All kinds of technology and some articles that we've posted. And speaking of that, it is time for the top of the show, Dudes and Beer Week in the News, where we kind of cover some of the stories that we post on our Facebook page. We post, or Facebook group, rather.
Yeah,
find us on Facebook, Dudes and Beer. You can find the Dudes and Beer podcast page also, but where you get all the latest news. But on our Facebook group, we post all kinds of news just to spur conversation throughout the week.
Good stuff.
And some of the headlines this week, out of The Independent, study finds self-deprecating humor is linked to better well-being. So, yeah, you know, it was always told to me, like, I was an awkward-looking kid. Like, I had huge feet. My grandfather used to make fun of my feet all the time because I say, you know me, I sit with my feet on top of each other.
Yeah.
You know, like a tower. And he's like, shit, don't do that. You're going to scratch my ceilings. I've got size 16 feet, and even in 7th grade, when he passed, I had big feet. So, but he was always like, if you can't laugh at yourself, you have no right to laugh. Exactly. And that's kind of what this study showed, was the fact that, like, people who are able to laugh at themselves and able to take themselves lightly in the world have a better sense of well-being and are more grounded.
Right.
So thank you, Papa, for that little bit of Cajun wisdom. Express UK lets us know the Illuminati is real and secretly running our world, claims former Defense Minister Paul Hellyer. A former Canadian Minister of Defense is believed to be the highest-ranking former politician to come out as a believer of the popular conspiracy theory of the Illuminati. Fox News, quote, Cloverfield crayfish, speaking of Mardi Gras, created a new species of self-replicating female mutants. A 10-legged mutant crayfish is on the march throughout the world. They're all female. They don't need males to fertilize their eggs, and they're proving remarkably resilient and adaptive. Now they're threatening the destruction of native freshwater species and the devastation of entire ecosystems.
Radiation.
According to the article from Fox. NBC News lets us know Vanessa Trump was taken to the hospital as a precaution after white powder was sent in an envelope to her home, very reminiscent of the post 9/11 attacks on congressmen and senators, stuff like that, with the anthrax envelopes. That was the scare. Her and two other people were taken to New York Presbyterian.
She shouldn't be opening up her own mail.
And right.
I'm sorry. When
at that point, you should have like a male beefeater.
Yeah,
you know, like somebody, you know, like seriously. The beefeater vodka. Like the job of the beefeater was to taste the king's food to make sure it wasn't poison. Like, I'll take a taste, and in 30 minutes, if it's good, go ahead and eat.
If you're still alive, that's great.
That's a good idea. I need to get a male beefeater. From the Chicago Tribune, LS Channel 7 blazed graphics mix-up on air for confusion between P.F. Chang's and Pyeongchang. Apparently, on the Saturday news, while covering the Olympics, the graphics person put in P.F. Chang's instead of Pyeongchang for the Olympics 2018. And it's a pretty funny picture. Go look it up, folks. As a graphics person myself who does that kind of stuff live, it just made me crack up.
I know.
It was like somebody wanted to lose their job. Don't tell me that wasn't that wasn't right before you went on air.
I'm not laughing at him. I'm laughing with him. I mean, that is just stupid.
Out of The Guardian, quote, hurtful Harper Lee and Mark Twain are dropped from the Minnesota school curriculum. TechCrunch lets us know that DNA nanorobots successfully targeted and killed off cancerous tumors, according to an article from the Journal of Nature Biotechnology. Science were able to show tiny autonomous bots to have the potential to function as an intelligent delivery vehicle to cure cancer in mice. Fox News also tells us 33 pounds of fentanyl was seized in the biggest raid in Boston ever, tied to the El Chapo regime in Mexico. It was literally enough fentanyl to kill every person in the state of Massachusetts.
I was going to say, who are they trying to kill? King Kong?
The Telegraph UK lets us know lost wreckage from the British Roswell flying saucer was discovered in a science museum box. Out of the BBC also, a big cat poacher was mauled to death and eaten by a pride of lions while he was hunting them. Only his head remained on the African game reserve.
What do you expect? Take that chance.
And NBC Tampa says a man's Apple iPod earphones blew up after he took them out of his ears and set them down on a piece of machinery at work. The left earphone blew up, and he was very thankful not to have them in his ear.
I was going to say, could you imagine if they were
We'll be talking about that this evening. And speaking of other things that we'll be talking about, we have some tech news out of Gizmodo, a few articles that we posted. The NSA sent coded messages from its official Twitter account to communicate with foreign spies. According to reports, an unnamed Russian met with U.S. spies in Germany, and the NSA communicated with them via tweets on their public account, via coded tweets. Gizmodo also reported the Equifax loss. Even more information on consumers was lost than what was told to the public. Boston Dynamics' unsettling RoboDog can now escape through unlocked doors. Regardless of the fact that they're unlocked, the robot now knows how to open doors on its own, which is just some wild stuff.
That's great.
And then on another tech front, and we'll find out if I didn't ask him beforehand, but we'll find out if Levi knows anything about cryptocurrencies, because I'm curious about this in crypto mining. But AMD's newest processors are apparently so good that you can skip the graphics card, that they will actually have the equivalent of GPUs built into the actual processor for computers. And that means that you won't have to have a graphics card to run high-end programs, stuff like that. So that is the news of the week. And on that note, Levi, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You actually just got off a trip from Houston. How did that go for you guys today?
It went great. We go down there about once a month to help teach sales folks how to use social media more effectively. And we got back about half an hour ago. So I have poured some of Tennessee's finest, and happy to join you guys tonight.
Fantastic. I'm glad to hear it. I am a big whiskey lover myself. What are you drinking?
Gentleman Jack this evening.
Ooh, nice. That is my preferred method of Jack Daniel's delivery.
Such a gentleman he is.
As we start off with you, Levi, let's start at the beginning here. You are a fellow nerd. We got a chance to nerd out at a conference in Houston recently, but it was just before and cusping on the launch of your website, nerbutler.com. Tell our audience a little bit about Nerd Butler, what it is now, and where the roots of this project and website and business came from.
Sure. So Nerd Butler, the goal of that name is hopefully self-explanatory when people look at it, but we all have technology in almost every part of our life, from our car to our watch now. Our headphones have batteries in them. We've got 5 different kinds of wireless radio signals running around our house between Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and our TVs are smart and our ovens are smart. And that all can get pretty overwhelming. And I love it, and I play with it every day, and I read about it, and I learn about it because I'm fascinated. But for most people, they just want their lives to be easier. And I met so many people who found technology making their lives more difficult that I wanted to help them understand what they needed to use, what they didn't need to use, even more importantly, and just help them do more with the technology they had, because it's supposed to make your life easier. And if it's not, you need to get rid of it or learn a little bit more about it. And finding an IT guy sometimes who can speak English, plain layman, I just want the thing to work English, can be tough sometimes. So Nerd Butler strives to be that voice. Yeah,
exactly. Tell me where to put the food for the magic elves that live in the box.
Exactly.
And that's just it. I myself have found myself over the last few years taking on quite a few people and teaching them AV and stuff like that because they wanted to learn. And hey, somebody took the time to teach me. Aside from my own learning, somebody saw the fact that I had aptitude and said, "Hey, come here, kid. Let me show you some other cool tricks." And that's kind of what I think. I don't know, I guess coming from being a nerd in junior high and high school and in college, that's what nerds always did. Like we always, whenever we found something that we were passionate about, we got into it full tilt boogie. And not only that, but when somebody else showed an interest, we were willing to show them how to go full tilt boogie as well.
Right.
Absolutely. And you know what? Talking to nerds is great. Honestly, I'll tell you the reason. Originally, the company was a consulting company to actually go into people's homes and help them. And then I realized I could affect more people if it was a content brand and we had things that people could refer back to. But it started out because every year when I went home at Thanksgiving, and every IT guy I knew, when they went home at Thanksgiving, they didn't get to eat dinner or watch the football game because every family member there brought their laptop with them and said, about computers, I'm sure this will just take a minute. And you spent the whole Thanksgiving weekend getting a virus off or installing an update or whatever. And originally, I wanted to hand out gift cards to all my IT friends and say, when you go home for Thanksgiving, instead of working on the computer, enjoy the turkey and just give them this gift certificate to come see me.
Right.
But we didn't quite get there with that model. So we're gonna focus on video and blogs, and I really hope it turns into something that the road weary and completely worn out nerd can refer their friends and family to get an explanation that will make sense to them, and then we can leave the IT guys alone to do the really important work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I was telling you just before the show that when I was in Houston last time before I left, my mom was like, "Can you help me fax this?" And I was like, I can like run a nationwide broadcast. I can network computers together. I can build a computer from the ground up. But what I do not know how to do is run a fax machine.
It's a lost art for sure.
It definitely is. It definitely is. And, I think something that you said a while ago, and that is the mantra of Nerd Butler, is the fact that technology is supposed to make our lives easier. It's been doing that since the Bronze Age. Since shortly after Stone, even the Stone Age was the birth of tools and technology in and of itself, the birth of fire, all of that. So since then, since the tales of Prometheus bringing fire down to man, technology has been growing and people have been growing. Our brains have been growing to adapt this technology to our life and to not only further ourselves, but to further ourselves as humanity. Now, where do you think we as individuals lie within that as far as how technology impacts us and how modern technology especially has changed society?
So it's really interesting. I've actually been listening to an audiobook lately, and I want to say it's The Power of Habit. And it's just the section I'm on right now is talking about marketing. And I did a little research. I think that the technology now, everyone will say, it's terrible. It's ruining us. Mark Zuckerberg has come out and sort of acknowledged that Facebook was psychologically engineered to keep us on Facebook, but not necessarily to make us feel good about it.
Yeah, the co-founder came out and said that it was like full on made for that.
But that's not new. Like ever since marketing has been around, their goal wasn't to make you feel good about the product. Their goal was to get you to use the product. And quite often those two things are the same. But quite often they're not. So, you buy a security system not because it makes you feel good, but because it makes you feel less scared, right? And I think all of our modern technology now, the humanity hasn't caught up to it yet. And I'm essentially an optimist about all of this. I believe it will. I believe we will come up with new social norms, new acceptable behaviors on an interpersonal level, and new standards of conduct for organizations, governments, businesses. But the human psyche evolves a lot slower than the technology is evolving. And it's just going to take a little while to catch up. When I was a kid, what's that?
I was going to say it does. It takes a while for us to learn to adapt that technology, for us to learn even a new moral code as societies as to how to deal with that technology.
Right.
But that struggle is not particularly new. When I'm in my mid 40s. When I was a kid, there were Velcro tennis shoes. And everyone threw up their arms and said an entire generation of young people will not know how to tie shoes. I had a digital watch. Oh, my God, how are we going to read clocks? And I watched television. Yeah. Oh, television is going to rot our brains. Now it's the phone that's going to rot our brains. But like everything else, I could have been watching PBS or I could have been watching Bugs Bunny. And with your phone, you can be starting your own business without a lot of capital from your phone. You could be driving Uber and making money, or you could be staring at Candy Crush all day. Like it's a tool like every other tool ever invented.
Yes.
I actually had to go back and look up the year. In the 1950s, you could buy for your child the do-it-yourself home uranium kit.
Yes.
And they would ship it to you with a little bit of uranium in it, and it glowed in the dark. It was the greatest thing ever.
Badass.
If our parents and grandparents survived uranium in their Christmas presents, I think we're going to survive smartphones okay.
Yeah. I think we may just make it. And that's just it.
What'd you get for Christmas, uranium?
I'm actually busy right now. One of the things that I'm doing in the new year with Dudes and Beer is starting a new blog with it, called Jumping to Conclusions, where we just take things and, hey, maybe I'm jumping to conclusions here, but take a look at this little string of events, it's just amazing. Number one, even to think, we were talking about it earlier. Stephen and I are both listeners of Art Bell and Coast to Coast AM, and Art Bell used to discuss this in the concept that he called the quickening. Mm-hmm. And he even wrote a book about it. Just the fact that things right now in society, technologically, and the way that technology is absorbed in society and used in our immediacy that we have now is just snowballing. And it seems like it's building up to something, and we aren't quite sure what it is yet, as a whole. But there's, like I'm the same age as you. I'm right there in my mid 40s, or I guess early mid 40s, 42. But
that year.
I firmly remember 8-bit and love it. I had Velcro tennis shoes, and I remember when the internet came around. Oh my God, kids won't know the Dewey Decimal System. Even whenever I posted the article about Harper Lee being stricken from, it was like, it's stricken from the curriculum, but it's still in the library. It's like, well, good God, I hope the kids are being taught how to use the library. Like, here's this antiquated system where here's the library at your fingertips. When I grew up, I had an insatiable search for knowledge, but I took things in very small bites, and I had at least a good 3 sets of encyclopedias that I'd read my way through by the time I was in 8th grade. There was a set of science encyclopedias, a set of animal encyclopedias, like regular encyclopedias. Nice. I loved them, and that was the original internet. Right. It was the encyclopedia. If you wanted to know it, go look it up by alphabetical order, and you'll find it.
Or start and read it all.
So, with that in mind, and just seeing the Moore's law, rather, not Bohr's law, but Moore's law growth that happens with technology, the fact that things get faster the quicker things go. I tell people all the time, what is available on the shelf is not what is actively being used by other people.
Right.
The chips that are being released that we were just talking about have been in testing for quite a while. They've been put in products. They've been doing stuff with them. That's how they test them before they go out to market. And it's amazing to me, like we were saying, how fast this technology moves, but how awkward it is for society to assimilate it. And how much we're still very much in baby steps as far as assimilating this stuff into everyday life.
Yep, absolutely. And I think there's a gentleman I really like. I listen to him on a couple of podcasts and read his blog. His name is Jeff Jarvis, and he's a professor of journalism at the City University of New York. But he's very one of the things he's really on about is this idea of social norms around technology. He's probably, and I hope he doesn't hear this and smack me around for it, he's probably in his late 60s, early 70s. And he was an editor for Entertainment Weekly. He's done a lot of different journalism jobs, and now he tries to teach his students how to do journalism in an age where digital moves everything so quickly. But one of the things he talks about is what we're missing now is a new set of rules. But that's happened repeatedly. It's just happening faster now, like you said, because of Moore's law and the way technology multiplies. But when cars first hit the road, driving on the right-hand side wasn't a thing. It was a one-lane little alley, and you pulled the horse off to the side to let the other horse go by, and you had time to make that decision, so we didn't need a rule about which side of the road to be on.
Yeah, I want to say it was a year or so after that the first traffic lights came about.
Yep. When the telephone first came out, what's the etiquette for answering a phone when there's only 100 of them in the town?
Yeah.
And that evolves as now every house has a phone. Now every person has a phone. Now every person has their phone with them all the time. And we're constantly evolving. Is it okay for me to not answer? Now, I came from 20 years of break-fix help desk work. Sure. It was never not okay for me to not answer my phone.
Yeah.
And then I had teenagers, and it was really not okay. Now, there's only a couple people in the world that I would care enough to wake up at 2 a.m. to answer the phone, and I live with both of them. So if I get a call at 2 in the morning, I'm not answering it. Is that okay, or is that completely – because a phone call is so easy now. An email is so easy now, but we feel that burden of replying to all of these communications that we're getting, all of the Facebook messages and LinkedIn messages and tweets.
Yep.
We feel this psychological burden of having to reply to all of this stuff.
Yep.
Because we don't have new norms yet that account for the fact that anybody can send me 1,000 messages a second all day long.
Yeah, and it's inordinately easy to do. I thank you for accepting the burden of my message, Levi.
Of course. Honestly, I feel bad that it took me like an hour and a half to get back to you, because that's where I was raised from. If you got a message on your old school answering machine with the tape, as soon as you got home, you listened to the message and you returned the call immediately, because that person had been waiting around for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And we haven't overcome that yet. It's going to take a couple of generations, and by then we're all going to be mind linked anyway and have the implants in the back of our skull, so it won't matter.
Yeah. We'll all be Johnny Mnemonic.
Ooh, just plug me up.
And, it's funny because I did, as a latchkey kid from a single mom, I didn't not answer the phone myself. Like, that phone rings, you better be answering the phone.
You better be answering.
Because that may be, that was before the age of caller ID. Like, it may very well be mom calling from work.
Yeah.
Or like mom calling from campus.
You just had to answer
after work. So, it was like.
If you don't answer, she's calling the cops.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't answer 3 times, like,
your ass is in trouble.
There's gonna be a knock, and it ain't gonna be me because I have a key. Now, with that in mind, I remember that was one of the conversations that we had. Whenever I first met you in Houston, was about security, things like that. Because my mother, of course, whenever I showed up at her house, was like, "Hey, guess what? I have a tech issue," and she had fallen victim to the phone call. And the
asking money,
the phone call from somebody saying that there was an issue with her Yahoo account, all that kind of stuff. And hey,
all we need is $400 and your password, and we'll take care of it for you.
Yeah. Oh no, it went to remote desktop. And I was like, here's the thing, you don't check your bank account on here until I get to come with either a new hard drive or a copy of Windows 10 and just wipe your hard drive. I don't care about any kind of malware that you went through. You gave somebody remote access to your desktop. Like, you need to wipe hard drives. It's got to go away.
Absolutely.
And she felt bad, and I was like, don't feel bad. Like 1 out of 10 people on the daily get hit.
Enough that they keep doing it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know people. I know more than one. Yeah. Happens a lot.
Well, and, it's the fact that I was like, number one, and I showed her the article that we posted a few months ago about because I remember we covered it. We talked about it. The numbers from the actual Yahoo hack that happened in like 2015 finally came out. And it was like 3.6 billion people. Like a third of the planet.
I was going to say, that's way over our nation.
A third of the planet.
That's everybody who ever signed up and the second account they signed up for.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. So, and I showed my brother, I was like, dude, I can't believe you still let mom have a Yahoo account. I can't believe you're still using a Yahoo account. Like, get off Yahoo. Remove it from all your stuff. And that's just that's not me like endorsing. I guess that's me endorsing that. I'm sorry, but when every single account has been hacked, get away from that platform. Like run,
dude.
Like it's a building on fire. Run. And so I still have to wipe her computer.
One of the things we talked about, like there's so many vectors for that, right? I've actually helped a couple people that got called by a rather official sounding person saying, I'm working on behalf of Microsoft and we noticed there was a virus on your computer. They called their office landline. And this gentleman was in his 80s, and of course he's like, "Oh well, how proactive of you. These computers are amazing, aren't they?" And sure enough, remote desktop, and they locked the computer. And the only way to get it unlocked was $400. And because I'm the one who returned the call with my number, to this day, I get a call from that company about every 3 weeks saying, "Do you recall last year when you gave us $400 to fix your computer?" And I'm like, no, I don't. And I hang up. But I know the end of that conversation is we'd like another $400 because it's still broken.
There's actually a guy here recently that started making a good name for himself, and we should get him on the show. And I'm trying to remember the name of his YouTube channel, but basically he records himself on video with the audio of the phone calls from all these scams that call him, and he just eats up as much of their time as possible.
Nice.
Just asking them erroneous questions and all kinds of stuff. It's hilarious.
Sounds like...
But I do the same thing, and I almost fell for it the first time I got a call from Microsoft. Because I had just signed up for Microsoft. It was the first piece of Microsoft software I'd ever registered in my name. And it was like, okay, maybe. And then they started asking me stuff, and I was like, I have a question for you. What's the last email you sent me? I'm logged into my Microsoft account I'm logged into my Microsoft account right now. If you're telling me that there's a problem with my Microsoft account, that means you have access to it, which means technically you could see my emails too. What was the content of the last email that you sent me? We don't have access to that. I'm like, no, you don't, because you're not Microsoft.
Exactly.
But you do have to be kind of savvy to be able to click onto that. Like, they had me on the phone for a good 10 minutes. Like, it was a good long 10 minutes. By that time, I should have been done with the hard sale.
Yeah. Well,
by all rules of sales, like, we should have been done with a handshake and halfway through a drink, you know?
I think that's the hardest part. That's the hardest part with, and for lack of a better word, I don't think people are Luddites. I don't think they're technophobic. I just think that they have other things to do with their lives. Now, if it's your hobby and your passion or your profession, or for some other reason you have all that knowledge, that's great. Yeah. And I think at this point, everybody needs some degree of technical literacy. Yes. But if you can operate your television and you can check your email and you can do a couple other basic tasks, I think that should be enough to get you through the day. But educating people on the idea that, software vendors don't call you. They don't. Exactly. If they call you, it's not like I've never in my life heard of a legitimate call from a software vendor unless it's business to business and you're the representative for the company. But I mean, I get unsolicited calls all the time. Like, we would love you to try our product for your company. Like, okay, fine. But they never call my house and say, your computer is broken, because that would imply that they had access to my computer and I didn't allow that. Yeah. Exactly. And educating people on that, it's not a long conversation. Unfortunately, you usually have it after the fact. And it's the same with spam emails and viruses. Like, if you get an email from someone you don't know promising you something that sounds too good to be true, for God's sakes, don't click on the link. Yes. Because that's the way it goes.
Well, and that's what I ultimately told my mom. She was like, oh, my God, that email is tied to, like, every one of my accounts, though. And I was like, here's the thing. Yeah. Do you remember, like, when I was a kid, and even in high school and college, and you used to spend, like, the first Saturday of every month and call up and pay your bills? Every one of those places still has a 1-800 number. You can still call and pay your bill with your bank account or with your credit card right there on the phone. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to do it online. You're retired. What else are you doing on a Monday afternoon? What else are you doing? Like, physically call them and pay it to avoid that kind of situation.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely. That's a perfect example of, like I was saying before, I think there's a lot of things that people, I have to have a smartphone. Yeah. I have to have a computer. And honestly, like, if you're still in the money earning phase of your life, I think you do need those things, just because it would be really hard otherwise, unless you're in some really specific industries. But I agree with you. If that's all she does with it, you should get her a Chromebook to check email with, and a flip phone to make her calls with, and a list of 800 numbers to pay her bills every month, or to set up auto deposit, whatever. But yeah, people get wrapped up. Listen, I have shiny thing syndrome.
Me too.
Horrible. Like, I bought the Pixel 2. I want to buy a Pixel book, but that's completely out of the budget because I bought the Pixel 2.
Do a review on it. Do a review on it. Contact him to do a review. Let me be honest.
Nerd Butler is a vehicle if I can be successful enough to get trial units of things. Let's not lie. Gadget Review sounds awesome. But for the vast majority of people, they just don't need all of that. My wife uses about 4 apps. Yep. And I've seen lots of studies that say the average person has 27 apps on their phone and uses 6 of them. Yep. So we're not as committed to this stuff as we think we are.
Yeah, quite honestly, I was happy with my BlackBerry. I loved my BlackBerry. It's still one of the most secure systems out there.
I was going to say, more secure.
That's why the government uses it. That's why most high-end businesses still give BlackBerries to their big execs, because like, it's an uber secure system. It's pretty locked down. If it weren't for the fact that I can use like an audio RTA in a room on my phone and see the frequencies that are feeding back. The day I saw those tools in my industry available on a smartphone, it was like, okay, I have to get a smartphone. It was only for that reason that I got one.
That's a problem for which you found the solution. Now, I'll be honest. I got a smartphone, and then I started trying to justify the cost. So I now solve a lot of different problems with my smartphone that I wouldn't have otherwise thought to use that for. Oh. I could have bought a $50 phone and a $500 camera and been $500 ahead of the game.
Every communication we've had, other than this Skype conversation, has been via my smartphone.
Yep.
Every single one.
It's really interesting that the tool is there, and then we start finding problems to solve with it, which is awesome. And it's one of the reasons I loved digital technology, because a software developer can look at that slab of carbon in your hand and say, I wonder if I could monitor a heart rate with it. Or I've seen heart rate monitors that use the flash on the phone.
Yeah.
To illuminate your finger, and then the camera picks up the throbbing of the blood, and that gives you your heart rate. That's pretty powerful.
I'd like to get into that for a second, because that's something that if you go back and look on previous episodes of Dudes and Beer, like within the first year, we were talking about that stuff, because the first banks were talking about Google Glass had come out, and we did an episode on that and how I didn't trust Google Glass. I wouldn't buy something that's going to have like an infrared laser looking at my eye all day.
Right.
It's an infrared laser. You're not supposed to like point your remote control at your face either, man. Number one.
I love that. That's true.
Number two, it's the fact that infrared laser is the same thing that a doctor can put on your finger and get your pulse with. Which means now they're getting even more information from you, not just your social information. Now they're gathering biometric information. So imagine the fact that you go to withdraw some money from your bank account, and instead of an ATM card, you're using a retinal scanner, and it happens to notice that you're drunk. And it happens to notice algorithmically that you withdraw like $200 or $300 about two or three blocks from a strip club frequently at 2 a.m. We don't think this is responsible spending. Like it's only a step away, and all of that's utterly possible via exactly what you're talking about. The fact that you could use your smartphone to check your blood pressure or your pulse rate with the camera.
Right.
It's
a lie detector as well. Like I have some family members with medical issues that make it really vital that they be able to check their heart rate at various times of the day, which is incredibly valuable. And like I said, I'm basically an optimist about this stuff.
Sure.
The situation you just described with the ATM machine, I think that's absolutely, 3 years away from a working prototype at the most, right? Yeah. But I view that as I don't see that as the whichever particular boogeyman you choose to bow down to, whether it's the corporate overlords or the deep state or whichever particular boogeyman you subscribe to. I'm what I would sign up for? At heart. I would sign up for a bank that had a beer goggle sensor on the ATM machine that I opted into.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So when we have somebody who's convicted of DUI, they put a breathalyzer in their car. Now, that's not exactly an opt-in situation, but that is a responsible use of a technology. Yes. I should use technology to protect myself and others, to help me make better decisions, whether that's researching different product reviews online so I buy the best product, or telling my bank that occasionally I have lapses in judgment and I really don't need $500 when my blood alcohol is above a certain level.
Well, right? It would be the same thing were they to put in the exact same scanner to be able to start your car.
Exactly.
They'd be able to read your BAC and hey, you're out of the factory. Car wouldn't be able to start if you were over a certain blood alcohol content.
Now, the horror story that I always hear about is with health insurance, and that's particularly because of the way health insurance is distributed in this country.
Sure.
But if a health insurance company had all of the metadata that Google or Amazon or Facebook or all three had collected about me, they would know.
Disturbing.
Yes.
They would know statistically when I was going to die.
Yeah.
And they would be able to decide whether to grant me life insurance or medical insurance. That is a bit of a problem because that's no longer my technology in my hands. Well, and that's the thing that I'm most excited to see evolve, is us taking control of that as a society at an individual level rather than organizational one.
Yes. And it blew my mind. One of the first conferences that I worked whenever I first moved to Austin, was it was a black hat conference here in town, like a hacker conference, and the former head of Cyber Command, Wesley Clark, was speaking.
Wow.
And he was talking about how, and this was probably about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
6 years ago.
Mind you that, yeah.
that this conference happened. And he was like, 3 years ago.
Yeah. So now we're talking 9.
The FBI came to me and said that through social media data, through algorithms and just general data gathered off of people, cell phone pings, things like that, that they could actively predict your location within 2 hours.
Sure.
I believe it.
Within a
We've helped them out
2-hour
a lot with
window,
that, 'cause
they could.
Google Maps knows where I am all the time.
Exactly. And I had the situation happen to me. It was creepy enough. My wife had heard me talk about Google hearing me talk numerous times, but had never seen it until we were in Vegas. And we were walking past a bar, and I was like, I thought about coming in here and talking to the manager about doing a live episode of Dudes and Beer from the bar.
Yeah.
And I said the bar's name, and, as we were walking by, because I was pointing it out, and we walked on, went to Caesar's Palace and walked the strip and came back a couple hours later. And as we passed the location, my phone vibrated, and I looked, and it was a Facebook alert. And the bar had liked Dudes and Beer.
That's
on
crazy.
Facebook.
That's crazy.
I had never been to their social media. I had never gone and liked their page. I had never sent them a message.
Yeah.
All I did was mention them to my wife as we were walking past it. So it was my Google location and my microphone hearing me say the name.
That reminds me when I was in the market for buying a refrigerator.
Yeah.
I never searched for it on my phone, but I sure enough had enough talk about it in my home with the phone around.
I remember that.
And I get on social media, here's ads for a refrigerator. And I'm like, what the hell? Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting the way that, and I work a lot of big data conferences. I work a lot of insurance conventions. One of the big things on their mind right now is, of course, cybersecurity. That's where I met Arshawn McCleskey, the Secret Service fraud agent that we had on the show, that just blew our mind talking about the scams that he's been involved in, both internet-wise and just physically. Like I said, the reason I got an RFID wallet was after this guy was on the show. Because he was talking about people bump scanning wallets,
walking by somebody,
bumping into people with a scanner and picking up the RFID off their payment system from their card, all kinds of stuff.
Now we have an issue in Austin with the gas pumps having those
skimmers.
The skimmers that is so bad. I want to say it was the sheriff or something went on the local news saying, "Do not use your card at the pumps here in Austin."
Yeah,
and he did that.
Yeah.
It was that bad.
Yeah, because there were some that couldn't be pulled off.
Yeah,
they looked exactly like the real thing.
Yeah,
and, but
horrifying.
With all that kind of stuff happening, Levi, what are a couple of tips that you typically give people to protect themselves physically like that, but also in the digital realm?
Sure. And I'll say, I have always heard those stories about your phone listening and the assistants are always recording, which is kind of true and kind of not. They record, they have to be listening locally all the time so that when you say that wake word for the Amazon Echo or for Google Home, they can wake up. So obviously they're listening. I'm might be a little Pollyanna. I tend to think that
I love that.
The number of data points that we're sending out there without our voice at all are so great that, for instance, in your example of the dishwasher or even the bar, it knew where you were. Now, I don't think somebody in the bar had a social media tool that was watching to see who walked by and what their Twitter following was or what their online personality was. Maybe one of the waitresses heard it and thought that was cool, and they happened to be the one running social media that week.
Oh, they weren't open
with the
yet.
dishwasher. They weren't open. Man, you're blowing me out of the water here. I tend to think that most of those things can be explained with other data points, like email, because Google reads your email, right? Because that's how they place ads within Gmail. So there's a lot of data points we send out there. Voice is one of them, and honestly, we actually said this in our training today with a sales group. Privacy is dead. Social media killed it. Take a deep breath, move past that, and let's address the next concern. And one of the news stories I think you talked about at the beginning was the Equifax story. When I speak on technology to a lot of people, I always get the question, so if I have one of these voice assistants, an Echo or a Google Home in my house, aren't you worried about the privacy implications and giving all that data away? Well, I never purchased a product from Equifax in my life. I never opted into Equifax's email list. I never asked to be in their database. They went out and purchased all of that from third parties without my consent or knowledge, and then lost it all. So I'm all about companies where their livelihood relies on my goodwill as a consumer. And I am completely against companies where their livelihood has nothing to do with my goodwill as a consumer. So Equifax lost all of this data, and their penalty is what?
Exactly.
I can't get a mortgage or a car loan or a Best Buy financing without Equifax.
Right.
It's impossible.
I got that same letter.
So in terms of how you can protect yourself, I think there's a couple basic things you can do. Don't answer the phone call when it's Microsoft calling. Use two-factor authentication whenever you can, which I don't know. Do you guys use two-factor on any of your accounts?
No. Explain that a little bit. So, I have noticed recently on my Android phone, though, that whenever I get a call like that, it says scam likely.
Really?
Right, yeah. So Google Voice does a really great job of filtering out spam calls and identifying the numbers. But two-factor authentication means anytime I log into my account, particularly if I'm logging in from a device I've never logged in from before, or from a location I never logged in before, it says, we're going to text you a 6-digit code.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I do use that. I do use that.
So that's a free service from Google. And Google is sort of, for me personally, it's sort of the keystone to all of my digital life. But only 10% of Gmail users use two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of a pain in the ass, but it's a pain in the ass once a month. You can authorize that computer for 30 days. It's not that bad at all. And they've actually made it better to where I don't even need to get the text message anymore with Google. I've said anytime I log in from a device where you need that second factor, just ping a notification to my phone and I will tap yes or no. So that's two-factor. I use two-factor on all of my social accounts, on all of my banking accounts that allow it, on all of my email accounts. So I think that's an important one, because then even if there is a breach and they lose your password, A, hopefully they notify you as good corporate citizens and you change your password. But B, if somebody in India or Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan or wherever they are tries to log into your account with that stolen password, your phone's going to go, hey, here's the code for you to log into your Twitter account. Go ahead and enter that, and you're going to say, I'm at the beach and I'm nowhere near my Twitter account.
Yeah, I'm not trying to look at Twitter. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Right. So I think two-factor authentication is like one of those. I want to say it's easy. It's easy for nerds, for sure.
It's not hard.
I don't know that I don't know it's easy for everyone just because they're not used to it, but it's incredibly powerful. Now,
I think it's cumbersome. I think it's cumbersome for other people. It's not that it's hard. It's the fact that it's one extra step.
Yeah, and
that's literally the mentality.
When they work in a
I
corporate
see.
environment and they have to change their password every 60 days, that is like the bane of their existence, and it can't be any of the last 5 passwords. Right. But the question to me is, and I argue with people about this all the time. They're like, I could do my job better without this computer. And my counter argument is, this computer is how you do your job. If you were a carpenter and said, I'm a great carpenter, but I can't use a hammer, you'd be fired immediately.
Yeah, you would have no job.
Like, accept that this digital stuff is part of your life. Now, if you don't want it to be part of your personal life, limit it as much as possible. but understand that you're limiting your access to the world because that's where we're all at now.
Yeah.
But get two-factor authentication. Physically, out in the physical world, I think an RFID wallet is actually a pretty sane idea. Honestly, I think the bump skimming is, I think there are pockets of it in the country, but it's hard for me to get worked up about that.
Most of it's abroad, not here. But
what's that?
Most of the issues of bump skimming have been in Japan and abroad, not necessarily here in the United States.
And again, I'll say from like the worst case scenario, one of my credit card companies, and I think I have three now. I have, between my banks and my credit card companies, I think I have three financial institutions. One of them sends me a new card about every 3 or 4 months.
Oh, wow.
So at least annually, all of them send me a new card. And the reason they send me a new card is either they've been breached or Home Depot got breached, and my number happened to be part of that breach. So the fact that like some weird hipster-looking dude in Tokyo bumped up against me and got my credit card number is actually the least of my worries in terms of security of my credit card numbers.
And that's just it. And so many people, especially in our parents group and up, Levi, and have. It's a new world for online shopping for them.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Like they grew up with the Sears catalog. They know what that is. They know what mail order is and stuff. But to be able to order online is a whole new panoply of things. And even my mother had the same issue with a company that she ordered a sample from, and then it ended up being a subscription. And it's like don't click on things. That is the rule. You just do not click on things. I don't care how free it says it is, or how big, or how many times it flashes.
I go over this conversation constantly with my parents.
I think it's hilarious. Yeah, I think it's hilarious that for all of these, we talk about cybercrime and digital and this and that. Man, I got a new credit card because the Target retail database, the store's physical database, got hacked. Mm-hmm. They lost my credit card number because I walked up to the cashier and gave them my credit card like I was supposed to.
That's right.
So, the thing that I see evolving, both on a personal level as we evolve new rules for how we interact on social media. We teach these sales classes on LinkedIn, and somebody asked today, if I call somebody and leave a message and then I send them an email, is it also okay to send them a connection request on LinkedIn at the same time? Well, maybe. I think it probably is. Other people might see that as pushy because we don't have norms yet, right? I have to wear pants because that's the norm. But sending 3 different connection requests at once might be okay to some people, might not to others.
People, I think even still, and it's something that your speaking partner Eve talks about, is the power of LinkedIn. Like I've got a good friends connection and a decent enough following on Facebook, enough people in groups and pages, things like that. But when it comes to LinkedIn, it's much more a place where professionals are talking to professionals about professional things.
Absolutely.
And
it's so funny with social media because, and this goes back to sort of the conversation we have with our parents' generation, which is, they're like, oh my gosh, all of this technology. But there are norms on social media now, and it's contextual. Yep. When you're using LinkedIn, you're at the office. When you're using Facebook, you're at home or at a family gathering.
Or at
when
lunch.
You're using Twitter, you're at a really noisy. Twitter is a really noisy bar, right? Mm-hmm. Instagram is like hanging out, having a lunch with your 3 most pretentious friends, right? Like that's what it is.
Twitter's.
We tell people all the
Twitter's
time,
when you're at the Oval
Instagram is where
Office.
you go to make your friends jealous.
Yeah.
So, but it's fascinating to me that we have all these norms, but we haven't yet evolved those norms to the point where they become legislation to hold people like Equifax and financial institutions and large retailers to account for their responsibility with our data. So I can't remember. There was a time when if you were convicted as a corporation of dumping toxic waste somewhere, the fine was significantly less than the cost of disposing of the waste appropriately was.
Yes.
So you were incentivized to just dump it in a ditch and pay the fine.
Like down.
Right? And I feel like that's where we're at digitally. If I lose 10 million credit card addresses in a data breach because I did not change the default password on my database, there is no corporate accountability for that. MasterCard issues me a new credit card number, and Home Depot issues a press release.
Yeah, right.
And hopefully internally they plug that gap and just wait for them to get caught by the next gap. But we haven't evolved legislation.
Yeah, we need new laws on that.
Now, just as nerd to nerd here, what is your password schedule?
My password schedule? I don't have one, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I use LastPass as my schedule. I assume you mean how often do I change them?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't have one. So I use LastPass as a password vault.
Okay.
And I think I have about 500 accounts in there.
Wow.
And listen, I would like to tell you I'm perfect. I sign up for every damn web app, every beta of every silly product that's ever come out.
You have to, though. You have to.
Yeah.
It's the nature of the beast. Like, dude, if it wasn't for this podcast and other things that I do for, like, my podcast network and stuff like that, I probably would not be on social media. Like, I don't even put my baby's name in pictures of my baby.
Right.
So that there is no name tied to his biometric data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one thing for me to post a picture of him.
I think, and I read an article this week about how Microsoft is trying to do away with passwords completely because they're terrible.
My God, I was going to bring that up.
One of those things that what's that?
I was going to bring that up. Go ahead.
Passwords were invented at a time in which we had nothing better. Mm-hmm. Right? It was the only way of securing things. We didn't have biometrics. We didn't have two-factor. We didn't have any of that technology. So I use LastPass. I think it's great. I also share a lot of passwords between my wife and I, like the Netflix password, for instance.
Sure.
And I do that through LastPass, so she doesn't have to see it. I also do work with digital marketing agencies. When a client wants to give you access to their Facebook account, you can't keep those passwords in a spreadsheet. So LastPass is the easy option there.
Yeah.
But I don't change them. Every password I have is it's set to the maximum that platform will allow, and sometimes that's 16 characters or 24. It's set to the maximum complexity.
Ooh, man.
This is what drives me crazy. This is what drives me crazy because there are websites that have my credit card number stored that will not allow me to create a password with special characters.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
You guys, I'm assuming you guys are familiar with XKCD, the webcomic?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, there's a really great one about password complexity and memorizing them.
Tell our listeners where they can find that and what it's all about, though, even though we are aware of it.
Sure, xkcd.com, and it's a webcomic that's been going on for years now. And the guy, frankly, he's one of the smartest and funniest human beings on the planet, and he's just this very quiet, reserved nerd, and he comes up with some of the most brilliant things I've ever seen. And I can't remember which particular comic it was that dealt with passwords, but he actually lays out the math and shows that if I have this incredibly impossible to remember password that's only 8 characters long, the security factor of that, like how long it would take to crack it, is whatever to the whateverth power, and I can't remember the numbers. Yeah. But if I write out the sentence 10 little Indians, ! It is exponentially more complex and harder to crack and exponentially easier to remember. So passwords are kind of a fool's game anyway.
Sure.
So I use two-factor as much as I can, and I just go into LastPass and allow LastPass to create the passwords for everything I own. Now, I am not perfect, and LastPass has this fabulous tool called the Security Score, I think it's called. Let me look real quick. But it will tell you, like, of the 400 or however many you have in your vault, how many are duplicates?
Now, is LastPass a paid service?
LastPass has a free tier.
Okay.
They have like a family tier, and then they have an enterprise tier. And I've used all three. The free tier is completely functional.
Oh, wow.
In fact, it used to be, I'll have to look now, because it used to be that the premium was $12 a year for an individual. Like, it's a totally worthwhile investment. I think, and the big bonus there was you got to use the mobile app. If you have Android, the mobile app will actually autofill your apps for you. It's a spectacular service, and I highly recommend it. Now, everybody asks me, well, if you have all your stuff stored in there, what happens if they get hacked? They encrypt the data on the client end. And what that means is they encrypt the data on your device, and then it gets sent to the LastPass server. And LastPass does not have the keys to unencrypt it. So even if their entire database gets stolen, the only thing they could get would be your user data for LastPass. They can't get what's in the vault.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really very nice.
Very
you can also store things like, you can store form fills like payment profiles. I've stored server, like Microsoft server credentials in there, secure notes, and you can share these with other people in one of two fashions. One, you can share it without exposing the password, or you can share it so that they can see the password. This is awesome for digital marketing agencies. It's awesome for family.
It's like a different form of Dropbox, but way more secure.
Yes. Security challenge was the feature I was trying to think of. And I'm going to look at my score right now just so I can be honest with the world. I think I have a 70% security challenge score.
Wow, that is not bad.
And what it says is, what it tells you is how many times did you use the same password for multiple sites?
Sure.
It'll tell you how many passwords are a dictionary word, things like that.
Okay.
So it helps you understand, one, how many passwords you actually have. I think I read a stat a couple weeks ago that like the average American has 130 passwords, which I find impossible to believe.
Yeah.
But not that impossible. That seems high, but not by a factor of 10, like maybe twice as high.
Yeah.
Right. So if we all have 4 social media accounts and a work email and a home email and our cable bill and our phone bill and our electric bill, it adds up to 30 or 40 pretty quickly.
Right.
And
the other thing that we'll do.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, I was going to say the other thing they've started to do is they will show you if you have a site in your LastPass vault that was the victim of a breach, LastPass will notify you.
Oh, wow.
Which is awesome. So
especially if you're a website owner.
In there, yeah. So, but they're looking at all of your passwords. So, I've got everything in there, and I'm not, you guys know the service LifeLock?
Yes. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
It's like $12 a month to make sure so the CEO of LifeLock put his social security number on billboards and had them drive around on trucks in Seattle and got hacked immediately. Yeah. Had his identity stolen immediately because he's a silly human being. So I'm not going to do that, but I've got all of my banks in here. I've got all of my credit cards in here. I've got my retirement account, like all of my financial life is in LastPass. All of my social media life, which is to a large degree my livelihood, is in there. I trust it with my life, quite literally. And to me, it's an indicator of what technology can be. And I think one of the things we're going to get to in the near future is our medical records being digitized and handed to us. And that's another area of technology where it should, and I hear that in your voice, and I understand why, man. That's the best. But if I've moved around the country 3 or 4 times, I've had 3 or 4 primary care physicians, I've seen a couple of specialists, I don't have access to my own medical records.
You don't, which is insane.
That's true.
I literally just had that issue at my doctor going to get my meds renewed. We were talking about past issues and about why I got on my meds to begin with. Right. And I was like, this is all in my history, no? And they're like, oh, well, it didn't come to us from your last doctor.
Yeah.
Right. So I had to sign a permission piece of paper saying, you're allowed to contact this clinic and this doctor, and you'd think it'd transfer from insurance to insurance and stuff like that. It does not. It does not.
Yeah. So as much as I dislike Apple for a variety of reasons, they do a lot of things well, and I think they're actually gonna win this one.
Yeah.
They're going to win on medical records because they have from the beginning. And the best way I've heard it described is Apple took the fact that they were really bad at cloud and interconnecting services and turned it into a feature. We're all about privacy. Like, I think they were forced into that because they were behind.
They spun it amazingly well from the engineering end.
The Apple Watch is the best wearable device for health tracking because it tracks a whole bunch of stuff already.
But so will your cell phone.
Apple has a better reputation for privacy than the other major players in that space.
Yes.
So they're going to win that one, but it'll trickle down to everybody eventually.
But see, I would challenge the fact of my Android device or any cell phone will track your steps or do anything like that to begin with.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, you don't have to pay for a watch to do it.
Yeah, but Apple does a better job of marketing themselves in that area.
Oh, they're brilliant at their marketing. I mean, good God, since their first marketing campaign and commercial during the Super Bowl, they've been on top of their game.
They build the sexiest hardware and they market better than anybody. I remember
their
Steve
stuff
Jobs
is beautifully engineered.
iMac, luscious fruity colors.
It does not. Their stuff is beautifully engineered. It functions well for people who just need to do things. As far as someone who builds computers, who is a nerd and a modder, like I own a pedal modification business. Like I modify people's guitar pedals and stuff like that.
Oh, nice.
Like, that's what kind of nerd I am. I take people's circuits and I'm a master, and I can't wait to teach my son.
It's behind his ear like a pin.
I can't do it until he's at least 8, and it kills me to wait for like the next 7 years almost to teach my son how to solder. Because he's got a fascination with cables to begin with. He sits in his high chair while I build computers and just sits there and like watches me with great intent.
Nice.
And it's like, nerd in training.
It's never too early because eventually, if you wait till they're like old enough to know better, they're going to find a different hobby.
Exactly.
Before they go to kindergarten, they can solder. I guarantee it.
It is the modern industrial trade. Like when we were kids, man, we still had wood shop. We had auto shop, stuff like that. Kids don't have that anymore. Instead, they have computer programming classes. They have classes on WordPress. They have classes on the internet,
but they don't know how to write cursive.
Well, that's true.
I don't know how to write cursive. All right.
The cursive Q is a lost art. Most definitely.
Let him burn himself a little bit with that soldering iron. There's something really.
There is.
It feels like vinyl, right? It feels like I listen to records.
There's nothing like the smell of smoldering flesh. You're right.
Oh Jesus.
There's nothing like the smell of like your nerve endings.
Yeah, and you know what? My skin burning smells better than the vinyl. Well, I'd rather be the skin than the vinyl.
It's interesting because as we grow technologically and go into these things at the same time, there is a reversion societally with people in what's now being known as the hipster generation.
Oh yeah,
stuff like
millennial,
that.
All that.
People go like you were saying, the rebirth of vinyl, things like that. I mean, even amongst musicians, tape is coming back.
Good.
I saw that.
And
I'm waiting for the VCRs to come back, but I don't think it'll happen.
The last one rolled off the line a year and a half ago.
I was going to say almost 2 years ago. Yeah.
That was one of the first episodes you were on.
They come back in a different form,
that
right?
Line.
So the kids wear bell bottoms ironically because their parents wear bell bottoms unironically. I feel like that's how vinyl and some of those things are. But there is a certain it's really interesting. So my stepdaughter's 11, and she is all about slime. I don't know if you all have been introduced to slime.
Oh, God, yeah, man. I've been making slime for 20 years, and I just had a kid 9 months ago.
It's perfect. But we were talking about it, and one of the things we told her is like, all of your homework is on the computer, all of your art class is on the computer, all of your everything is digital. People crave that physical, that tactile interact. Like we're physical beings, and we were born to chop wood and chase elk across the tundra, right? So doing arts and crafts and doing slime and woodworking and metalworking and soldering. I mean, soldering, it's electronics. But I'm so excited to see things like the Raspberry Pi out there, and Google coming out with affordable AI kits that you can physically build, because that's what kids need to get themselves energized about the technology.
I'm here to tell you, Levi, and I'm here to tell you, my entire audience, I thought my entire life, because of my lack of math skills, I could not design or make circuits or understand the math behind circuits. Utterly untrue. And I actually learned to read schematics and do all of that off of Google.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Off of literal Google searches over a year and a half, I taught myself schematics and circuit design.
Damn. Very nice. Yeah.
Because, like I said earlier in the episode, when you're a nerd, when you find something that you key into, you tend to just dig deep.
Right, exactly. No, exactly.
And it utterly envelops you. You can't not be permeated by it. And I remember at the time that I decided to start my company, it was when I was on broadcast. And I was working a 50-hour work week. And at the same time, like my wife and I were kind of passing shifts in the night. I would get home at about 3 in the afternoon, and she would leave at about 5 until midnight.
Right.
And it was like, you're gone.
What
like most of the time that I'm asleep, that I'm awake before I go to sleep to be at work at 5 or 6 a.m. So, like, I need something to do. Do you mind if I sink a few $100s in a whole bunch of spare parts? Yeah. It seems like a whole bunch of musicians I know really like the modifications I make to pedals. Yeah. And I literally started buying used pedals off Craigslist for $30 and coming up with modifications and adding them to the website. And it was $30 at a time, adding a modification. And one modification would pay for 2 pedals, and it was just this metric system of building a business.
Nice.
I love that. I love that.
It utterly...
Way to use your brain.
It utterly occupied the time that my wife was not there.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're right. That is absolutely the nerd ethos. It's like, I want to know the how.
Yeah.
Like, it's not good enough. It's not good enough that it works. I want to understand the how behind it. Well, and the why, sometimes we care and sometimes we don't, but the how is the one that keeps you up at night.
Well, and exactly. It's the one that just perplexes you. And I remember about 2 years ago at Christmas, my nephew Nathan, I love him so much. He was my first godchild, and he wanted to build a computer. This kid was 14 years old, and he was like, I want to build my own computer for gaming.
Okay.
And, of course, my brother put the word out for Christmas, like, hey, if you want to get him something, get him an Amazon gift card so he can buy the parts that he wants to build the computer that he wants.
Right.
And my dad, as sweet as he was, like, kept sending my brother, like, ads for computers from, like, Best Buy and stuff like that for gaming.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
the point.
Yeah. I remember sitting back on my dad's patio and having beers for him. He's like, your brother keeps on telling me, like, this isn't what he wants. And I'm like, he's like, it was a great computer for $1,000. I'm like, okay, here's the thing. Yeah. If you want to spend $1,000, give him $1,000 Amazon gift card.
Ooh, yeah.
What you're missing is the fact that this 14-year-old kid wants to build his own computer. Man.
Right. Yeah, he wants to do it.
That's not something that you discourage.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
If you want to give him $1,000, give him $1,000 for parts. He'll build a hell of a computer for $1,000.
Yeah, like, even better than that.
Way better than that $1,000 computer from Best Buy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or pay him to build you one.
Yes.
Even better. Pay him to build you one.
Exactly.
Because then he'll never forget it and he'll realize he can make money at it.
Exactly. And it's one of those, like, that's something that I think has kind of skipped a generation between our parents and us and what exists now?
Our fathers grew up taking apart their cars with a 9/16 wrench and a spark plug socket and putting it back together again. And when the cars became computerized or got chips in them and we couldn't do that anymore, they didn't know how to teach us to do that sort of thing with the next generation of technology.
Yeah.
But I think it's coming back around a little bit with things like the Raspberry Pi, which, a lot of people don't know about, but it's a $35 computer, and it's just the guts, the circuit board, and then you can do literally whatever you want with it, but in a very nerdy fashion. It's all up to you to figure out what to do.
And let me ask you this, because one of the most popular things to do with them is, of course, build crypto mining machines. Are you hip to the crypto circuit? In the area of full disclosure, I own almost one full Ethereum token. Ooh. And that's mostly so I can have a vested interest in following along. But I'm fascinated by it. I've read a bit about the origin of Bitcoin and sort of how the crypto actually works. Because explain if you know anything more than I do, because as far as I know, it was supposedly started by this guy in Japan who started the first blockchain and things like that. Explain some of these terms for our audience if you know what they are, blockchain, things like that.
Sure. So cryptocurrency is in reference to. Well, let's go back to that. The thing that will blow your mind if you think about it too long, so I never do. What is money?
Yes.
We all agree that I have this piece of plastic in my pocket that has a certain amount of dollars attached to it that I can spend. Or if I want to, I can get out this green piece of paper and hand it to you, and you will hand me a Coca-Cola. Which
at one point was actually based on a monetary amount of ounces of gold. Things like that.
But it's no longer.
No.
It's now based on the full faith and credit of the U.S. government.
Yeah, it's whatever we wake up and say it's worth.
Yeah.
At one point in
pretty much
the Netherlands in the 1800s, tulip bulbs were worth a fortune each.
Yes.
Money is whatever people decide has value, right?
Yeah.
So cryptocurrency is a completely digital form of value exchange.
Okay.
So let's start with that. Now, blockchain, which you mentioned, blockchain is, if you know even a little bit about accounting, you understand what a ledger is, right? It's like a check register or your bank statement, or it's a list of transactions.
Sure.
Blockchain is a shared ledger. It's a shared list of transactions. In the case of Bitcoin, blockchain is a shared list of every transfer of any portion of any Bitcoin that has ever happened, which means that if I went into Target and used Bitcoin to purchase something, anyone who wanted access to the full list of transactions could see that a certain amount of value passed from one party to another in that transaction. Now, on one hand, that sounds like completely not anonymous financial dealings, right?
Sure.
But I don't have to expose who I am in the transaction, just my username, to make it really simple.
Yeah.
Blockchain is a really fascinating technology. And when it comes to cryptocurrency, I think that the actual currency part of this is going to fade.
Define a blockchain for our audience, though, and for me, for criminy's sake, because I'm a nerd.
Imagine,
but I know how to break into some WordPress code like Neo.
Ooh.
That's as deep as I get.
Follow the white rabbit, bro.
Blockchain sounds really complicated, but have you used Google Docs or collaborated on an Office spreadsheet in Microsoft 365? If you've ever used a shared spreadsheet before, everyone who's in the spreadsheet can see everything on the spreadsheet, and they can see the audit trail of everyone who's altered the spreadsheet and what it looked like before and after they altered.
Great for business,
right?
as we use it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So blockchain is the world's biggest Google spreadsheet on steroids. So if I say that one Bitcoin is worth $1,000, right? And I would like to buy a car from you for $800. I can transfer 0.8 Bitcoin to you, and you will hand me physically the title to your car. And in the Google spreadsheet, or in the blockchain in this case, a transaction is recorded that says party A gave party B 0.8 Bitcoin, and it has this cryptographic or this numerical address. And the reason it's so powerful is that you can't fake it.
Sure.
Because everyone who has any Bitcoin has access to that entire spreadsheet. So if I say I gave you 0.8 Bitcoin and you say you actually got 1.6 Bitcoin, every other copy of the spreadsheet in the world is going to verify my side of that story.
Okay.
So that's the short version of blockchain.
That's a great description of cryptocurrency that I've never ever heard explained so simply.
I was going to say that's the best description that I could.
Like I actively get cryptocurrency now and the concept of it.
Right, yeah.
Now the question comes to bear, much like our currency to begin with. What the hell is it actually based on? What the hell is it valued on?
Sure.
And how do you even go about buying a freaking Bitcoin?
Mining. But yeah,
So
let him start.
That's always the second question. First question is, what the hell is it? And the second question is, what the hell do I do with it?
Right. Look at it.
Well, I mean, like, we've had a vendor on our show that accepts Bitcoin. And I thought about having him on, but I was like, I really need, like, a tech person to come on. And, I have a friend of mine from high school that is supposed to come on for economic stuff and is like a contributor to Fox News on Neil Cavuto and stuff like that. And she's like, I can't come on and talk about Bitcoin. I just don't get it. Like,
sure,
don't get it.
I can. So I feel like we got to first base with an understanding of blockchain, right?
It totally got me further than where I was, for sure.
Let's get a little more friendly with it now, Levi.
Let's do it.
Excellent. So we've had a couple of drinks now. Things are going well.
Yeah, I had more than a couple.
Blockchain is the underlying technology for most of, if not all of, the cryptocurrencies. I own Ethereum, Bitcoin, Bitcash, Litecoin, Dogecoin, which is hilarious in its own right for other reasons.
We need to start
but there's
Dogecoin.
probably 20 or 30 serious cryptocurrencies that actually have market cap that makes you take notice.
Yeah.
What do you use it for? So like you mentioned, some people take Bitcoin as a payment. Right now that's tough because it's so volatile that you don't really know if you're getting value. You might wake up tomorrow and find out that Bitcoin went from 8,000 to 4,000, and the thing you just bought you got for twice what you should have paid.
That's just it. I mean, I didn't even add that into the articles for today, but I should have. The fact is, like, Bitcoin randomly lost half its value.
Yes, because nobody knows where it's at. Like, where it's at. And we can talk about that. So I will tell you this, as I am not. Disclaimers, I'm not a financial expert. I'm not giving you any advice whatsoever.
No. Absolutely not. Neither is Dudes and Beer, dude. Yeah. Like, good God, we're dudes and freaking beer.
Yeah.
We're not financial advisors. Because I want to pay attention to it.
Exactly.
But there are Bitcoin is one of the largest exchanges, and you can go and pay a $30 transaction fee. And I'm sorry, not Bitcoin, Coinbase. Coinbase is the name of the exchange. So just like you would get an account with E-Trade to buy stocks and bonds, you can get an account with Coinbase. Robinhood is an app that you can get on your phone that helps you invest in stocks easily. They've recently added Bitcoin as something you can do, and they purely did it as a marketing play to get more users. I know. But if you're going to invest in any cryptocurrency at this point, it is purely speculative. It might be worth zero tomorrow. It might be worth $10,000 tomorrow, and we really don't know why or how or what. Right? So if you're going to do it, that's funny money, and don't ever expect to get it back. But the way it works, the way it works is how do you create a Bitcoin, right? Because while it's a digital currency, it really does only exist in one place. And that sounds counterintuitive, but I'll explain. So Bitcoin was created by Satoshi Sakamoto?
Something like that. Yeah.
Even though he claims he wasn't even maybe perhaps the only sole creator or whatever. Yeah.
He was supposedly, and that's just it. Yeah. Everything that you find
He's
says,
the head name.
as far as we know, he was the progenitor of the blockchain.
Yeah.
Right.
He was
Nakamoto.
the first.
There we go. I think I had it backwards. Satoshi Nakamoto. Yeah. It could be a collective. It could be the Yakuza. It could be one guy in a basement somewhere. Literally nobody knows.
We have no
Satoshi
idea.
Nakamoto, last time I looked,
it's an Alibaba of money on it.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's almost an Alibaba of money, except Alibaba was a website and you had to register that.
Exactly.
You got some cool devices.
We know who started that.
Right. How do we create a Bitcoin? The way, and this is an overly simplified explanation because I frankly don't have the math to explain it the right way.
It's mining, but there's no actual mine.
But imagine a math problem that's so hard. It's cryptography. That's part of the name, right? So cryptography is based on math problems so impossible to solve that computers can't solve them unless they have 1,000 years working full time, right? Yeah. So what Bitcoin is, what anything with the blockchain is, you're probably old enough. Do you remember SETI?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to get the head astronomer for SETI as a guest. He just became my connection on LinkedIn.
Yep.
So the SETI screensaver was based on the idea that while your computer was just sitting there doing nothing, it could be analyzing radio signals.
Exactly, yes.
Right?
Me and Chris were talking about this.
Thing in the world.
That's what this totally reminds us of, the mining part.
God, now if it still existed nowadays, I would have a computer dedicated to it at home.
Right. That's exactly what it is, the old style.
So you would download this chunk of data from SETI, and it would look through it. But the thing with Bitcoin is it's on a curve. So there is an ultimate solution to the math problem that is Bitcoin.
Okay.
And as soon as somebody solves the last portion of it, there's no more Bitcoin to be had. So think of Bitcoin like gold. Gold is not being created. It is being extracted from the earth, right? And during the gold rush in 1849 or so, out west in California, people could walk into a stream, stick a pan in the water, shake it out, and there would be a gold nugget there just waiting for it, right? And that was good for about the first 3 months. And then all of those nuggets were gone, and we had to start digging holes, right?
Yep.
And we found all the gold.
We started mining.
Dig deeper holes with bigger drills. So at some point, it didn't become worthwhile for every John, Dick, and Harry to run out there with a pan and try and find 2 nuggets.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin is working the same way. So Satoshi Nakamoto created this, whoever he, she, or they are, and mined the first third of all the Bitcoin that will ever exist.
Okay, but
then they released the algorithm to the rest of the world.
And see, here's my issue is that you made a video game, and then after you had fun with the first 3 levels, you decided to release everything to everybody else so that you had a jump start on the video game. That's how I now see Bitcoin. By the description, because I mean, as opposed to the gold rush like you're talking about, and even the gold standard that we were on until the 30s, whenever they went around and did all their stuff, and the Federal Reserve came around, and we decided to just start saying the dollar's worth whatever we say it is when we wake up, and it's based on an ethereal amount. It's almost the same thing, except it was based on nothing to begin with. Gold in and of itself is a finite resource, and like you said, like there ain't no more being made. Whatever was made by the earth at its creation is what was made. It's not like oil, where like the next layer of stuff going down is going to create
part
more gold.
At the beginning of the universe that was instilled when our beginning was.
It's an element. There's a finite amount.
There's only so much.
I can understand
Bitcoin. The elegance of Bitcoin is that they replicated that scarcity model digitally.
But
And there are people
But it's a one
who
and
had
zero,
Bitcoin
and it
miners
didn't exist
a
to
few
begin
years
with.
ago.
And I guess technically that's the case for all of our money, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So they replicated that, and then a few years ago, you could do a Bitcoin miner with just a pretty standard desktop computer, and actually get some value out of it. But when you see all these stories now about how I think the Bitcoin mining taking place in Norway is actually costing way more in electricity cost than it's producing. So we're at the back end of that gold rush, right?
Yes.
But once you have solved part of that puzzle, once you have mined some Bitcoin, it physically resides on whatever medium you mine on until you transfer it off. So I've heard stories about guys who had 12 Bitcoin on a hard drive on a computer they threw in the landfill 3 years ago.
Yes.
Oh God!
And it is now worth
I've heard something like that.
They're out at the landfill 3 years later trying to dig it up.
Dude, I had a buddy of mine that I've known since third grade in Houston. When I say they literally, like we said goodbye, and a few hours later, I went and hung out at his house, and then went to my mom's. And what did he do? Literally, he was like, "Hey, I've got a project for you, and if you can recover the data on this hard drive, I'll give you $5,000." I'll give you $5,000.
Guaranteed you went to work.
that was the thing. Was that it was like
Bitcoin.
It's some Bitcoins that are trapped in there, and I have no idea how the hell to get them out.
I'm still having an issue with what in the hell it is.
If you can't remember the password you use to encrypt it, you're also out of luck. Even if you have a physical medium, like you're just stuck.
There's no way to retrieve that.
And that brings me back to that nerdy point of the schedule, because my schedule is once a year. Like, people that I maintain websites for just got their documents, like this last week. It's like, here's your new passwords for the year. And once a year, I go through and change all that stuff.
I've been doing this long enough now that I tell people I don't really care if you write down your passwords. I really don't. If you have a little old school address book, little black book, and you're writing your passwords in it,
go for it.
Who cares? But make them complicated and change them periodically.
Yes. And I mean, most of
it's not the physical stuff of them.
Yeah, and I mean, most of the websites that I maintain for people don't take payment. They don't sell product, things like that. They're merely an informational website where it's got some contact information, that kind of stuff. So it's not like they need a crazy amount of security, that kind of thing. So it's definitely, as you said earlier in the episode, it's the technology that you need as you need it. And that's absolutely what I try to educate my clients on as well. Is like, if you don't need this right now, let's don't spend the money on that. Like, until it comes to the point that you're taking payment online, we don't need to have that kind of system in place.
Absolutely. Let me put a bow on the cryptocurrency stuff real quick.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I love it.
I think that the money part of it is going to be kind of like those Dutch tulip bulbs back in the 1800s. Like, the thing topped out at 20 grand. It's back down to 8 for Bitcoin.
Yep.
Some people predict it'll go to 0. Some people predict it'll go to 50,000. I think the more interesting part that's going to come out of this is the blockchain technology allows you to have an unalterable audit of digital activity. And if you think about it in those terms, think about if you've ever done work on servers, you know what audit logs look like. And now we have this distributed cloud of servers all over the place. I think the blockchain technology is going to be applied by businesses on any process where they need to have absolute certainty about what actions took place when and by whom. And the currency part of it, that's one thing you can do with a green piece of paper. Right? You could also write a note on a green piece of paper. You could also sign a green piece of paper and say, this is the deed to my house.
No.
Right? It's just a vehicle of auditing a change in a system.
Granted, if that green piece of paper has a dead president of the United States and says legal tender on it, you can't write on it. So don't go out and do that, folks.
I mean, I get those bills all the time. I get those in restaurants all the time. You absolutely can. And see, this is the funny part. So Ethereum, the reason I bought Ethereum and my wife bought Bitcoin is because I thought I was smarter than her.
Ooh, a household battle.
I know, it's always like that. We're very competitive.
Explain the battle. What's the battle about? Why the conflagration within the household for investment?
We bought in at the absolute top of the market, right? Like we're not financial wizards, so we bought in when it was almost peak. But I left her alone for 20 minutes, and she came out and said, "Let's buy $5,000 of Bitcoin." I'm like, "Let's dial that number down a bit." And
because I need some Ethereum.
But see, that's why the market was up, because Bitcoin entered the public pop culture conscience. Yeah. Right?
It really did.
All the stories that I saw was it was a gold rush. It absolutely was a gold rush of a different kind.
It was.
So it was a bull market, and everybody rushed in, and then it kind of reset itself. I bought Ethereum because I had read about the technology and the problems. So there's Bitcoin, and then there's Bitcoin Cash, which is a code fork, meaning somebody – this is the other great thing. That Google spreadsheet analogy we made before.
Sure.
There's nothing to stop me from taking a copy of the spreadsheet as it is right at this moment and making my own copy of it and saying, okay, from now on, over here, we're doing our own thing. This is this. And that's how code forks work in open source code, right? So
I was going to say, that's got to be an open source code at that point.
Right. So Ethereum, and the problem with Bitcoin and the reason it got forked and the reason there are so many other cryptocurrencies is Ethereum can only process transactions every 10 minutes, I think. So it's useless for stock trading because stock trading is too fast.
Sure.
It's great for paying tuition to college because you only do that once a year, right? Ethereum has a much higher input and a much broader applicability to what kinds of data you can store within one of the blocks on Ethereum's blockchain. And I know that I kind of jumped over the nerd cliff.
That's okay. But I mean, from what I'm understanding, that also makes it a little bit more stable because at the same time, it keeps so much stuff from happening.
Yes. So, but it serves a different purpose. Like, it's not better or worse in my mind. But when I read the fact that Ethereum can be used in a variety of sort of general computing ways, I was like, oh, that's the one that's going to win.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's interesting now because a section of a block on any of these blockchains can represent anything. It can represent cash value. It can represent a car title. It can represent the deed to a piece of land. It can represent, I actually saw one independent musician who was selling their album only on blockchain. And you had to have the blockchain address to get your copy of the album, because what blockchain really does is create this idea that there is a set of digital bits that is unique and can never be copied. The great thing about computers is we can copy data infinitely, right? If I have one copy of Justin Bieber's new album digitally, I can make 1 million copies of it in 2 hours and no one can stop me. But blockchain prevents that.
Now I kind of want to release an album on blockchain.
Which is
look at it. People have done it. And they sold 4 copies, but it's okay. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah. Hey, if those 4 copies are worth $16,000, that's cool.
That is kind of
exactly.
Well, that's what blows my mind is that in Houston, actually connected to the Hilton Americas where we met. If you go down the second or third floor across to the George R. Brown Convention Center, right there, if you go down the escalators to the first floor, there is a Bitcoin ATM.
Oh, my God.
And there's been one for like 8 or 9 years. There's been one forever. And I remember going like, what the hell is Bitcoin?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
What is this?
And one of my friends going like, oh yeah, man, I got some Arduinos just mining like all day long. And I'm like, like, what the hell? Do you have like I refer to the magic elves in the box all the time. But like, are you shitting me right now? Do you have some gnomes in a box like mining things that do not exist? What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how long I've known about Bitcoin. And it just blows my mind to know that like a Bitcoin was worth at its max. What was the value there?
20?
Like close to. I think it was like.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago when it was multiple Bitcoins to buy a pizza in Austin.
Yeah.
Multiple Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right? So at the places that actually accepted it, because nobody knew if it was going to be worth anything tomorrow or not.
That's right.
But now, obviously, that has changed, and I'm going to Harvard on my 2 Bitcoins, and it'll be great.
Yeah.
But
and
so
that's
think,
my question is like, what's the daily limit on a Bitcoin ATM? Is it like 10 grand? You know,
your limit on getting money or whatever.
Like I'm gonna cash out like 0.1 of a Bitcoin. I need like $200.
Yeah. How's that work? Yeah.
But a lot of the things we've talked about tonight, medical records and identity in the form of passwords and all these other things. To me, blockchain is one of those things that can solve a lot of those problems once companies start to really grasp it and understand how to use it. So I foresee a day pretty soon where I have a little dongle-y device. Listen, I'm the first cyborg on the planet. Like I'm totally ready.
Okay.
Please insert that chip under the skin on the back of my hand.
You're a true futurist then. You're all about it.
Using blockchain, but using blockchain to confirm your identity, using blockchain to confirm that you have the authentic copy of your medical records or the authentic ownership of something. I see that technology as being the next sort of, people talk about things like quantum computing, and yes, we'll get there eventually, but blockchain is here as a technology and it's deployed already at an enterprise level. Like that's going to be the next thing that moves us forward in digitizing analog things.
Yep. Wow. And I can't explicate that wow more because it's absolutely true. And it's something that I've said on this show for the longest time. And it is the concept of Moore's Law, even going back to what we were talking about earlier, just the rapid succession of things and the snowball effect technologically that happens.
The way this thing's moving along, man.
You look at when Bitcoin, like I said, 9 years ago, I first heard about Bitcoin. And it was like, well, what the hell is that?
Yeah, what the hell is that?
And then about 4 or 5 years ago, it was like, whoa, like people are talking about Bitcoin. Like there are some news articles about Bitcoin, stuff like that. Crazy. Yeah. And then here in the last year, it's been like, whoa.
Oh, yeah.
Hey there, Bitcoin.
Yeah, he's all
kind of wish I'd have bought like about $300 worth of Arduinos and just built myself a friggin' mine like 9 years ago, like my buddy said. Holy crap. Like, what the? Right. And suddenly I have people offering me like $5,000 to like unlock a hard drive to get their Bitcoins out.
Right.
You know, like... And it is a different digital age with that kind of stuff. And even when you talk about data recovery, even when you talk about trying to backtrack somebody's life for the last 5 years and unencrypt that kind of stuff, it's one of those like you said, if you have to write it down on a piece of paper, write it down on a piece of paper. I'll be quite honest, and I challenge you, thieves. Make it into my house. Go ahead, try.
I think
number 2, try to find that thumb drive that has all the information on it. Yeah.
With digital security, I think it's really, to me, it's people get worried about the same way they get worried about getting mugged as they walk down the street. Like, don't worry about getting mugged as you walk down the street. Worry about what your bank is doing with your personal information, because the odds are a lot better you're going to get ripped off by your bank than you are by a guy on the street. Well, and I feel the same way about writing down passwords. Like, it's very few people are targeting you as an individual unless you're a federal judge or a celebrity or a musician or whatever. Well, if you're just a guy, nobody's coming after you specifically. They're coming after the database.
The straight statistic is the fact that if you have made a purchase online in the last decade, since online purchasing has become like the mode of, commerce,
exactly,
as we know it,
the big A word,
you have been hacked.
Yes, like
you've been hacked. Your information has been compromised. Be it your email, be it your social security number, or your bank account information. Like you said earlier in the episode, it's every 4 months that you get a new card. And when I was with Bank of America, I won't deny that was the absolute fact. Every 4 months, I got a new card.
Wow!
And it was
proactive, right? You got a letter saying we're going to send you a new card because we figured out that you were part of a hack.
And it was horrifying, man, because then I had to go through to every single payment system on every single account. And I'm here to tell you, folks, it's not just my 5 utilities. It's not just my bills, all right?
I actually kind of find it comforting because I know that if I paid for something on an annual basis, like I paid once a year, a year later, I guarantee you that card's not going to be good anymore. So I'm going to get an email saying we're about to renew you instead of being renewed without me knowing it.
It's like my server. I pay for it I buy it in 3-year chunks. By the time it comes about again, I'm definitely going to have to re-enter some information. It's 3 years down the road. It's just cheaper to buy it that way, folks. So there are some definite ways like that you can mitigate situations by buying long packages. Things like that. It mitigates you having to give out credit card information on the regs, that kind of stuff. But as we get to close out, I want you to once again tell everybody what nerbutler.com is all about, the mission, and where they can go to find everything for Nerd Butler.
Sure. So nerbutler.com, we recently launched the blog. We got our first couple of posts up there. There'll be more coming. Nerd Butler is intended to help you sort of take control back of the technology that's in your life, rather than the other way around. You should control it. It shouldn't control you. You can find us at nerbutler.com always, on youtube.com/nerdbutler, twitter.com/nerdbutler, facebook.com/nerdbutler. We try and keep that as consistent as we can, but we're active on all those channels. And if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have a particular issue you'd like to see us address in a blog post or a video, please leave us a comment on the website, on any of the social media platforms, or at contact@nerdbutler.com. And I'm always looking for things people want to know about when it comes to the technology they're using. And there's a lot of technology sites that are nerds talking to nerds.
Yeah.
And I read them, and I am fans of them, and I absolutely learn a lot from them, but that's not what we're shooting for with this.
No, that's what I loved about your website, and what I loved about your mission was the fact that it's nerds talking to people.
Exactly. And so it would be great if you all want to check that out. We are going to be posting about 1 blog post a week and hopefully 2 videos a week going forward.
Nice.
And we're always looking for things that people want to hear more about.
Absolutely.
That sounds sick.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Levi, for coming and being on the show.
Yeah, for sure.
For just riffing with us tonight.
I've got a real better understanding
in the news especially about Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Good God, we've been talking for the last 2 months.
Me and Chris
after shows about good God, we got to find somebody about Bitcoin, dude.
Yeah.
Like, my God, it's all over the news.
Yeah. And we have rush out and sink that college fund into it.
That's
I'm
a nerd.
And
It's like the
one of
nerdiest
those
thing
things
of like, it's up there.
I don't get this.
Yeah.
And I really feel unnerdy
Right.
for not getting this.
Yeah. When Chris doesn't say he knows that, I'm like, what?
And quite literally, the first girl I ever asked to go steady told me I was too much of a nerd. So, like, I kind of take that as a point of pride at this point in life.
You talk Star Trek the whole day.
Yeah, I'm a nerd. Yeah, I'm a nerd, and we rule the world. So, on that note, thank you so much, Levi, once again, for responding to my mass LinkedIn messages, and also for coming on and nerding out with us tonight. Please hold on after the outro here,
hang in there,
that we can talk with you for one more minute and tell you about sharing everything, stuff like that. And until next time, everybody, please make sure to tune into the Dudes and Beer podcast.
Do it.
Tuesday, you can download the app.
You might learn a thing or two.
Android, iPhone. Right now, we've been having a few issues with the iPhone app, but we're working on that.
Yeah, I told people that,
But quite honestly, folks, it's great. You get to chat in. You get to talk with other listeners. Fantastic. Check us out on the HC Universal Network. And as always,
thanks for listening.
You can't be good. Be good at it.
To listen to our audio streams and chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app for both Android and iDevices, available on the Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Spreaker, SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the Revolution Digital Group family of podcasts. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.